Honeybee Obscura podcast listeners, this weekend, I was at a bee meeting where I had a young new beekeeper talk to me at length about laying workers. What a timely topic. Jeff, what's your situation? What's your concept of laying workers?
Laying workers is a challenge that I've faced. I think every beekeeper has faced, whether they know it or not, and it's a hard one to overcome. I'm glad we're talking about it.
It is. It is. I'm Jim Tew.
And I'm Jeff Ott from Beekeeping Today Podcast.
And we're coming to you today again on Honeybee Obscura, where we'd like to discuss the topic of laying workers and some idea of what, if anything, can be done about them.
You are listening to Honeybee Obscura, brought to you by Growing Planet Media, the folks behind Beekeeping Today Podcast. Each week on Honeybee Obscura, hosts Kim Flodham and Jim Tew explore the complexities, the beauty, the fun, and the challenges of managing honeybees in today's world. Get ready for an engaging discussion to delight and inform all beekeepers. If you're a long-timer or just starting out, sit back and enjoy the next several minutes as Kim and Jim explore all things honeybees.
Jim, I'm glad we're talking about this today. Can you explain to our listeners what is a laying worker?
Well, as best I can, I'll draw in the air here. But basically, if you see eggs, multiple eggs in a cell, that's a dead giveaway that probably 90% of the time, you've got a queen problem. If those eggs are stuck on the walls of the cells, if the colony is not thriving in many other ways, spotty brood patterns, lethargic, rundown, you got little nubby, undersized adult drones and you got drone cells coming out, this is not a good situation, Jeff. Not a good situation.
Yeah, and if you have little ruddy drones running around, you've had that problem for a while.
That by the time you see that, this colony is dead. It just hasn't finished dying.
Let's not get to that point yet.
Okay. All right. But I do want to go back to what I said because I was very conscientious about saying 90% of the time you've got laying workers because there is a little 10% thing that I need to put out there. Mm-hmm. If you've just put a brand new queen in a colony, and maybe a split or a nuke that you've made, sometimes that queen is so pumped up, so ready, so turbocharged, that for the first day or two or three, she will put multiple eggs per cell until the house bees, the nurse bees, can catch up with the productivity of this new queen. But that only happens if you got a new queen in place.
Yes, and that's a great point, and especially for those any new queen, whether it's from a breeder or from a swarm. I think that's a good point to keep in mind that there is that chance that you'll get that double egg syndrome.
Yeah, but in general, if you see this, what I've described, you've got a situation. Now, the reason I wanted to talk to you and to the listeners is that it was painful to talk to this young beekeeper that last Saturday. Because I have said it in articles boldly that we're beekeepers, we're not bee killers. So this young man wanted to do whatever it took to turn this laying worker colony around. And Jeff, he had already invested $32 in a queen and had installed her. And he was asking me if he should punch a hole through the candy plug to release her sooner. And I wanted to say, no, put the cork back out and get that queen out of there. But that's not what he wanted to hear. He wanted to be reassured that he had done the right thing.
What I want to know, Jim, is where did he find a $35 queen? That sounds like a pretty good deal.
Well, actually, it does. It was at a...
Did you get the address of that?
Don't lure me off the subject, Jeff, because I used to pay $1.25 for queens, and nobody wants to hear about some old guy paying a nickel for a Coke and $1.25 for a queen. So knock it off with the old man stuff. Right. I don't know where he gets those queens. You know, they're late in the season, and he said that 2 the nurse bees were already dead of the 5 nurse bees in the cage. So I think this queen he bought had been banked probably several months already. None of that has any bearing on anything. But Jeff, he did tell me this, and I want us to put this out there over and over again. It's in the literature, and I don't think we'll ever get it out. Podcast listeners, you can't take a laying worker colony, move it off its stand 50, 60 yards away, shake the bees out, and then go put that colony back on the original stand, thinking that you've left the laying workers out in the bush. The laying workers were back at that stand far faster than you were. And he had done that. He pridefully explained that he had taken it off and he had moved it away. And he's, I hope he doesn't listen to this podcast, because it really was an educational experience for me. He had done all the right things, but all the right things in the old literature is wrong. Those workers will take foraging flights. They go collect water. They do whatever. They act like workers that can lay eggs. And then when they're back and they have enough nutrient, apparently they will deposit an egg or two. You have more than one. Right. It's not like there is something called a pseudo queen, where a laying worker carries herself like a queen and can actually have a small retinue formed around her. Let me tell you, Jeff, I only find that in beekeeping urban legends. I have never seen that one time. But yet, if you really delve into the laying worker world, you'll find this concept of a pseudo queen. But I got to tell you, that's rare or non-existent. So back to my point, moving those bees away and off of the stand and shaking the bees out does not leave the laying workers out in the field. If you'll go back and look a bit later, all those bees are gone. They're back on the hive stand. So he had done that.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is where you tell me that you've done this in the past.
Well, I have, and I've come back with ended up with the same results. It's just,
there's nothing wrong. Honestly, here's brutal truth. Years ago, I did that because the books said to do it.
Absolutely.
So even though you put it in articles, and even though the newer books have these corrections in it, that recommendation, I think, will live in the beekeeping literature indefinitely.
But on that note, should there be a listener out there who's actually done this and have it succeed, let us know. I'd really like to hear a successful story of this actually working.
Well, they're coming. When you ask for that, they're going to be coming, because it's beekeeping. The only thing you can't do for sure in beekeeping, I've never figured out how to keep bees underwater. But everything else in beekeeping is possible. So I've had people tell me, Dr. Tu, I just heard you give this laying worker talk, and you need to know that I had laying workers in a colony that was in 2 deeps and 2 supers of honey, and there were thousands of bees in there, and I put a new queen in, and they took it, and it all turned around. I don't argue. I can't argue. I have no basis for argument. Beekeeping mistakes, beekeeping failures, colony failures are not standard things. Everyone have their own unique categories.
I wonder if it has to do with the length of time that the colony is without a real queen.
I'm guessing. You didn't ask me to guess. I don't know for sure, but yes, I'm thinking that the longer the colony is queenless, the more dire its situation becomes.
And therefore, our original comment that if you see little ruddy drones running around, the colony's dead and doesn't even know it.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I have, and some of the articles I've written in the past on laying workers, where I took a step way beyond any science that I had to support it. Could I say argumentatively that those drones, that those desperate laying workers produce is the final genetic dying gasp of that colony to leave some mark in the gene pool? It's a remote chance, but it's a chance. I mean, the bee knows, that colony knows in its own survival way that it's done. It's not going to survive the winter. It's not going to procreate and swarm next year. So is this putting a message in a bottle on a deserted island that maybe somebody will find it and send help kind of thing? I mean, is there any survival value in laying workers doing this just before they die?
That's a question for greater minds than mine, that's for sure. So let's talk. That sounds like a cosmic question. So we have those two different symptoms. I'm not sure if I've ever read any other symptoms that you can look for that are a sure telltale sign.
This is conversation, Jeff. This is not lecture. This is strictly a conversation. Yeah. There's a demeanor about the colony. The colony is defeated. The colony is not thriving, and the colony on either side of it has just got bees coming and going and pollen loads coming in. And here this colony that I'm worried about is just not thriving. So before I ever open that colony up, I'm suspicious. Mm-hmm. And then when I begin to go into it, there's no bees roaring out to meet me. There's no bees boiling over the edge. They're lethargic. There's not a population there. That just confirms my suspicion to this point. And then when you pull that first frame out, I'm expecting to see those attributes because I've already been kind of forewarned that something's not right here. So add that to the whole list. There is a demeanor. You know, the whole, in fact, don't get off the subject, Jim, but the whole personality of the yard changes over the season. My yard today, in the middle of July, doesn't have the same personality that my yard had in the springtime when the bees were just eager beavers to go out and forage and just swarming in the air and humming and bird singing and blue skies and apple blooming. And now it's July and it's hot and dry and the bees are lethargic. And I think they're probably robbing each other and they're testy and they're more stingy than they were. Same bees, different personality. And this laying worker thing, same bees as the neighbors on either side, but a different personality. Jeff, why don't we take a break and hear from our sponsor?
Hey, have you thought about helping your bees protect themselves as you head into fall? Yeah, it's that time when robbing frenzies start and your local nectar flow ends. If you add a robber screen, it stops unwelcome bees from entering your hives, and it can prevent the spread of varroa mites and the transmission of varroa mite diseases. For podcast listeners only, Better Bee has teamed up with Bee Smart Designs to offer a free Bee Smart Designs robber screen with any product purchase through October 1st, 2022. Simply use the code PROTECT at checkout to get your free robber screen.
I've also made the comment several times, I think I may have made it in this podcast, that we're beekeepers. We don't like letting our bees go. We don't like having them die. I mean, it's nothing about that. Mm-hmm. So these people want to save these bees. They want to turn them around. But I have to ask the question, what are we really doing for the colony that you're combining these laying workers with, if that, in fact, is going to be your solution? We're not doing the better colony much of a favor, giving them these run-down, depleted, nutritionally deprived bees with all these runt-sized drones. Really, Jeff, could I say this without having somebody just eat me alive? I think what we're doing when we combine those laying worker weakened colonies with colonies that don't have a particular need for more space, I think what we're doing is just having the better colony clean that mess up. Clean up those eggs, get that out, destroy that haploid tiny drone larvae that's there, kick out those undersized drones, and then importantly, keep the wax moth away. So really, I think if y'all look at the bright light of reality, what I hope to accomplish when I combine a colony is to get my equipment back. So argue with me on that, right or wrong.
I have to agree with you. The value that the laying worker colony provides the quote unquote healthy colony is zero. There is no value add there. In fact, like you mentioned, it's the healthy colony is just cleaning up the mess of the laying worker. So, yeah, the beekeeper has a choice. They can combine the colonies and try to save the few viable workers that will survive the combination and get to work. And then, like you said, the foundation and the rest of the waxworks for future bees. But there's no value in doing that. What is a bee? There's not much option there.
Right. This whole thing is distasteful, isn't it?
Yeah,
it was a split that didn't work. It was a swarm that didn't work. It was a colony hit by pesticides that died, had a hard hit. This colony is just not going to be here next year, and that's a distasteful thing for a beekeeper to have to deal with. The last question I want to bring up is by a new beekeeper. He's been keeping bees 4 weeks, and he thinks that one of the splits that he bought, one of the nukes that he bought, is queenless. How long before he develops laying workers in that colony? I just hate that question because everything's a variable. Mm-hmm. How much open brood did the nuke have when he bought it? What was the adult population? What was the age of the bees? Were they mostly nurse bees when he brought those bees home? So everything is a variable. But in general, you can probably develop laying workers anywhere inside of 3 to 5 days on the short side, up to maybe 2 weeks on the long side, before you really see the signs of laying workers.
In many cases, I think that we don't notice it, or maybe I should speak for myself. I know that it will take me several weeks before I notice that I have a laying worker situation. And often I will hope against hope and wait a little bit longer before I try to do something. And I never know really quite the right thing to do because it's I know ultimately nothing will work. But there's always that hope that
well, you're not right. You just try to do what's least wrong in this situation. So this, now that I'm depressed, we ought to wind this down and leave on a sad note here. But you can't go shake the laying workers out. You can't really put a new queen in. You're not really doing a lot for the colony that you combined it with. If you combined, you can go shake them out and just let them die in the grass and let them roam around, let them do whatever. That's distasteful. There really are no happy options to a colony that didn't thrive. So cut your losses, get your equipment back, and try it again.
One thing I've never tried, and I should, is just a frame of eggs and or a frame with a swarm cell or a queen cell in it or two. I've not tried that. I don't know.
Add that to your docket. You can be one of those people who calls in and says that you did that and it worked. And then you can make the rest of us look bad for just killing our bees off and not trying hard enough.
When I'm at that point, I'm usually at the point I'll try anything.
Yeah.
I'll be there. I'll be that one beekeeper trying to make something work other than letting them die because I'm pessimistically optimistic.
I think you'll pull it off. We're obviously beekeepers.
Yeah.
All right, I'm done. Know this, folks. If you keep bees long enough, you're going to deal with laying workers. It's just a way that a colony finishes its life when it's not thriving.
Especially,
I can't put a bright spin on the goodness of laying workers. I will tell you this, and then I want to stop talking. A laying worker colony is a beautiful colony to teach kids about the concept of keeping bees. The bees are defeated. The bees don't sting. There's a lot of drones there. You have almost no fear of the young students being stung. So other than the fact there's no queen and the colony is going to die, it's a great teaching tool.
Well, that sounds like a great glass of lemonade you've just made there.
All right. I can use that. It's a hot summer day. Hey, friend, all the best to you. And for everybody who listened and got this far along, thank you for hanging in there. I appreciate it very much. Until this time next Thursday, when we'll talk about something again just as enthralling. See you next time.